The glass was smudged, but my heart was crystal clear. I stood in Ethan's bedroom, a bucket of soapy water at my feet, staring at the New York City skyline as the sun dipped low, painting the horizon in hues of amber and rose. Ethan, my roommate of 6 months, had no idea how his casual request to clean his windows had set my pulse racing, or how it would unravel everything I thought I knew about him. I'm Vincent, 25, a graphic designer with a knack for falling for the wrong guys. Living in Brooklyn with Ethan, a straight finance bro who seemed to glide through life with effortless charm, was both a dream and a quiet torment. He was the kind of guy who could make a room laugh without trying, his broad shoulders and easy grin disarming even the most guarded souls like mine. We'd met through a Craigslist ad, a risky move in this city, but his quick wit and warm handshake had convinced me we'd get along. I just didn't expect to spend every day fighting the urge to confess how his laugh made my chest ache. That afternoon, Ethan had burst into the apartment, his navy blazer slung over one shoulder, tie loosened like he'd just survived a Wall Street battlefield. "Vin, my windows are a disgrace," he'd said, tossing me a grin that felt like a spotlight. "Help me out? I'll owe you one." His tone was light, but his eyes lingered on me a beat too long. Or so I told myself. I'd agreed, ignoring the flutter in my stomach. Because what else do you do when the guy you're secretly in love with asks for a favor? Now, here I was, sponge in hand, scrubbing at streaks on his floor-to-ceiling windows while he stood a few feet away, sorting through a stack of vinyl records. The apartment was a mix of modern and eclectic exposed brick walls, a sleek leather couch, and shelves stuffed with books and records that screamed Ethan's personality. The air smelled of lemon cleaner and the faint cedar of his cologne, a combination that was doing nothing to steady my nerves. "Vin, you're missing a spot," Ethan teased, glancing over with a smirk. He was leaning against his desk, one hand flipping through a Miles Davis album, the other ruffling his blonde hair. His white t-shirt hugged his frame just enough to remind me why I avoided looking at him too long. Perfectionist, I shot back, trying to keep my voice steady. I dipped the sponge into the bucket, focusing on the glass like it held the secrets to my self-control. But then he laughed a low, warm sound that made the room feel smaller, and I fumbled, splashing water onto my jeans. "Easy there, Picasso," he said, stepping closer. Too close. His hand brushed mine as he took the sponge, his fingers warm and deliberate. "Let me show you how it's done." I froze. The air between us crackled, charged with something I couldn't name. Was he flirting? No, that was impossible. Ethan was straight, painfully, undeniably straight. He dated women, talked about them casually, never hinted at anything else. Yet here he was, standing inches away, his breath soft against my cheek as he reached past me to swipe at the window. My heart pounded so loud I was sure he could hear it. "Ethan, I got it," I managed, stepping back to reclaim some space. But he didn't move away. Instead, he turned, his brown eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my knees weak. "You're blushing," he said, his voice softened now, almost curious. "What's that about?" I opened my mouth to deny it, to laugh it off, but nothing came out. The truth was clawing its way up my throat, and I was terrified of what would happen if it escaped. I'd spent months hiding how I felt, convincing myself it was just a crush, that I could live with the quiet ache of wanting someone who'd never want me back. But now, with his gaze pinning me in place, I wasn't so sure. "Vin," he said, setting the sponge down. His hand lingered near mine, close enough that I could feel the heat of his skin. "You okay?" No, I wasn't okay. I was falling apart, and he was the reason. But before I could answer, his phone buzzed on the desk, shattering the moment. He glanced at it, his expression shifting, something unreadable flickering across his face. "It's my dad," he muttered, stepping away to answer. I exhaled, my heart still racing as I turned back to the window. The city stretched out before me, a glittering maze of possibilities and heartbreak. Ethan's voice, low and tense, filled the room as he spoke to his father. I couldn't hear the words, but the strain in his tone was unmistakable. Something was wrong, and it wasn't just my tangled feelings. When he hung up, he didn't return to the window. Instead, he sank onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. "Family drama," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Same old crap. Want to talk about it?" I asked, setting the sponge down. I wanted to reach for him, to close the distance between us, but I stayed rooted in place. He shook his head, but his gaze found mine again, softer this time. "You're a good guy, Vin. You know that." The words hit harder than they should have. I wanted to be more than a good guy to him. I wanted to be everything. But I just nodded, swallowing the ache, and picked up the sponge again. The windows weren't the only thing that needed cleaning. My heart was a mess, and Ethan was holding the cloth. As the sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Ethan's casual touches, his lingering looks, they were starting to feel like more than just my imagination. But could I trust it? Could I trust him? Or was I just seeing what I wanted to see, setting myself up for a fall? The next morning, the apartment felt different, like the air itself was holding its breath. I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Ethan humming in the kitchen, a rare occurrence for a guy who usually bolted to work before dawn. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment from yesterday, his hand brushing mine, his eyes searching my face like he was looking for something he couldn't name. I dragged myself out of bed, pulling on a faded t-shirt and jeans, and found Ethan at the counter, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. His hair was still damp from a shower, and he wore a fitted gray sweatshirt that made it impossible to ignore the lines of his shoulders. "Morning, Vin," he said, sliding a mug toward me. His smile was easy, but there was a nervous edge to it, like he was testing the waters. "Thanks," I mumbled, taking the mug and avoiding his gaze. I couldn't shake the memory of last night's tension, the way his voice had softened when he called me a good guy. It was dangerous, letting myself hope, but hope was a stubborn thing. We sat at the small kitchen table, the city buzzing outside our window. Ethan tapped his fingers on his mug, his usual confidence replaced by something quieter, more vulnerable. "So, about my dad," he started, then stopped, like the words were stuck. I waited, my heart thudding, sensing this was more than just family drama. "He's intense," Ethan said finally, his eyes fixed on the coffee. "Always has been. Expect me to follow in his footsteps, big finance job. Perfect wife. Perfect life. You know the drill." I nodded, though I didn't really know. My parents were supportive, maybe too much. always encouraging my art, even when I doubted myself. Ethan's world sounded like a pressure cooker, and I could see the cracks forming in his carefully polished exterior. He called yesterday to remind me about some family event this weekend. He continued, his voice tight. A gala, black tie, the whole deal. He wants me to bring someone. A date. My stomach twisted. Of course he'd have a date. Some polished woman in a designer dress. Someone who fit into his father's vision of perfection. I forced a smile, hoping it didn't look as brittle as it felt. Sounds fun, elite. Ethan's eyes flicked up to mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw something, panic, maybe, or desperation. It's not, he said. It's a circus. And I'm tired of performing. I didn't know what to say. The Ethan I knew was always in control, always charming, always playing the part of the golden boy. But now, he looked lost, and it made my chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with my crush. You don't have to go, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Tell him no. He laughed, a bitter sound that didn't suit him. You don't say no to Richard Caldwell. Not if you want to keep the peace. I wanted to push, to ask why he cared so much about keeping the peace. But the words died in my throat. Instead, I reached for my coffee, my fingers brushing his by accident. The contact sent a jolt through me, and I pulled back, cursing myself for being so obvious. But Ethan didn't pull away. His hand stayed where it was, inches from mine, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. Vin, can I ask you something? My heart stopped. Sure, I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice cracked. He hesitated, his eyes searching mine like he was weighing something heavy. Would you come with me? To the gala? I blinked. Sure, I'd misheard. What? As my +1, he said quickly, like he was afraid he'd lose his nerve. Not like a date. Just I don't know. I just don't want to go alone. My mind reeled. Ethan, the straight guy who could have anyone, was asking me to be his +1? It didn't make sense. But the way he was looking at me, nervous and earnest, made it impossible to say no. Okay, I said, my voice barely audible. I'll go. His shoulders relaxed, and he flashed a grin that was equal parts relief and something else, something I couldn't quite place. Thanks, Vin. You're a lifesaver. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I tried to focus on my freelance work, sketching logos for a client, but my mind kept drifting to the gala. What was Ethan thinking? Was this just a friend thing? Or was there something more? I wanted to believe it was more, but doubt gnawed at me. I've been burned before, falling for guys who saw me as nothing more than a buddy. I couldn't let myself hope too much, not yet. That evening, Ethan knocked on my bedroom door, holding a garment bag. Got you something, he said, his grin boyish and disarming. He unzipped the bag to reveal a tailored black tuxedo, the kind I could never afford. Can't have you showing up to the gala looking like a starving artist. I stared at the tux, then at him. Ethan, this is too much. Nah, it's perfect, he said, stepping closer. He reached out, adjusting the collar of my t-shirt like it was the most natural thing in the world. You're gonna look great. My breath caught. His fingers lingered at my neck, and for a moment, I thought he might lean in. But then he stepped back, his grin returning, and the moment was gone. As he left my room, I sank onto my bed, the tuxedo draped across my chair like a promise or a warning. The gala was 2 days away, and I had no idea what I was walking into. All I knew was that Ethan Caldwell was pulling me into his world, and I was too far gone to turn back. The gala was a glittering cage. Chandeliers dripped light onto marble floors, and the air hummed with the clink of champagne glasses and the murmur of New York's elite. I stood at the edge of the ballroom, tugging at the cuffs of the tuxedo Ethan had given me, feeling like an imposter in a world that wasn't mine. Ethan, on the other hand, was in his element, or so it seemed. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and flashing that million-dollar smile. His black tux fit him like it was made for him, which it probably was. But I noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted to me every few minutes, like I was his anchor in this sea of suits and gowns. "Vincent," a booming voice cut through the noise, and I turned to see a man who could only be Ethan's father, Richard Caldwell. He was tall, imposing, with silver hair and a handshake that felt like a challenge. "So you're the artist Ethan's been raving about." I glanced at Ethan, who looked like he wanted to disappear. "He's exaggerating," I said, forcing a laugh. "I'm just his roommate." Richard's eyes narrowed slightly, appraising me. "Well, you clean up nicely. Ethan, you could learn a thing or two from this one." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Instead, he grabbed 2 glasses of champagne from passing tray and handed one to me. "To surviving this," he muttered, clinking his glass against mine. The night wore on, a blur of small talk and forced smiles. Ethan stayed close, his hand brushing my arm or my back more often than necessary. Each touch sent a spark through me, but I couldn't tell if it was deliberate or just my desperate imagination. His father's presence loomed over us, his expectations a silent weight Ethan couldn't shake. During a lull, Ethan pulled me onto a balcony overlooking the city. The night air was cool, and the skyline sparkled like a promise. "Sorry about my dad," he said, leaning against the railing. "He's a lot. He's proud of you," I said, though the words fell hollow. Richard's pride seemed conditional, tied to a version of Ethan that didn't quite exist. Ethan snorted. "He's proud of who he wants me to be." He turned to me, his eyes dark and searching. "Vin, why'd you agree to come tonight?" The question caught me off guard. I could have lied, said it was just to help a friend, but the truth was burning in my chest. "Because you asked me to," I said quietly. "And because I care about you." The words hung between us, heavy and raw. Ethan's breath hitched, and for a moment, I thought he might bolt. But then he stepped closer, so close I could feel the warmth of his body. "Vin," he whispered, his voice rough. "I don't know what I'm doing." Before I could respond, a woman's voice called his name from inside. Ethan flinched, stepping back, and the moment shattered. "We should go back in," he said, his voice flat. The rest of the night was a haze. Ethan was pulled into conversations with his father's colleagues, and I lingered on the sidelines, my heart a tangled mess. I wanted to believe there was something real in that moment on the balcony, but doubt crept in, cold and relentless. Was I just a convenient escape for him, a way to rebel against his father's expectations? As we left the gala, Ethan was quiet, his hands stuffed in his pockets. The cab ride back to Brooklyn was silent, the city lights blurring past us. When we reached the apartment, he paused at the door, his eyes meeting mine. "Thanks for coming, Vin," he said softly. It meant a lot. I nodded, my throat tight. Anytime, but as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of something dangerous. Ethan was hiding something, not just from his father, but from himself. And I was too deep in love to walk away, even if it broke me. The next week was a tightrope walk. Ethan and I danced around each other, our usual banter replaced by a charged silence that made every glance feel like a confession. I threw myself into my work, sketching late into the night, trying to drown out the memory of his whispered words on the balcony. I don't know what I'm doing. Ethan, meanwhile, seemed to double down on his golden boy persona. He left for work early, came home late, and filled the apartment with forced cheerfulness. But I saw the cracks, the way his smile faltered when he thought I wasn't looking, the way he lingered near me, like he was waiting for permission to say something. One evening, I found him in the living room, sprawled on the couch with a beer in hand, staring at the ceiling. The city hummed outside, a distant siren cutting through the quiet. "Vin," he said without looking at me. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" I sat on the arm of the couch, my heart thudding. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but I'm trying to figure out what's mine." He turned to me, his eyes raw. "I don't know what's mine anymore. My dad, my job, this whole thing. It's like I'm playing a role, and I'm tired of it." I wanted to reach for him, to tell him he didn't have to play anything with me. But before I could, he sat up, his knee brushing mine. "You're not like that, Vin. You're real." I envy that. My breath caught. "Ethan, you don't have to be anyone you're not." "Not with me." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and the air between us felt electric. "You mean that?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, my heart in my throat. "Yeah, I do." For a moment, I thought he might kiss me. His hand moved to my knee, his touch warm and steady. But then he pulled back, standing abruptly. "I need some air," he said, grabbing his jacket and heading for the door. I sat there, stunned, as the door clicked shut behind him. My mind raced, replaying every moment, every touch. Was he running from me, or from himself? I wanted to chase after him, to demand answers, but fear held me back. What if I was wrong? What if I was just seeing what I wanted to see? Hours later, he came back, his hair disheveled, his eyes tired. "Sorry," he said, sinking onto the couch beside me. "I just needed to think." "About what?" I asked, my voice barely steady. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine. The gesture was so simple, so intimate, that it stole my breath. "About this," he said finally, his voice raw. "About us." My heart stopped. "Us," he nodded, his eyes searching mine. "I've been fighting it, Vin. I thought I could keep pretending, keeping the guy everyone expects me to be. But when I'm with you, I don't want to pretend anymore." The words hit like a tidal wave. I wanted to believe him, wanted to lean into this moment and never let go. But doubt lingered, sharp and cold. "Ethan," I said, my voice trembling. "What are you saying?" He took a deep breath, his hand tightening around mine. "I'm saying I'm scared. I'm saying I've never felt like this before. And I'm saying I think I'm falling for you." The world tilted. I stared at him, my mind scrambling to process what he'd just said. Ethan, the straight guy I'd been pining for, was sitting here, holding my hand, telling me he was falling for me. It was everything I'd dreamed of, and everything I was terrified to trust. Before I could respond, he leaned in, his lips brushing mine in a kiss that was tentative, then desperate, like he was pouring everything he'd been holding back into it. I kissed him back, my hands finding his face, my heart racing as the world fell away. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine, his breath ragged. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered, "but I want to try." "With you," I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "We'll figure out," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Together, but even as I said it, I knew it wouldn't be easy. Ethan was stepping into uncharted territory, and I was stepping into a dream I'd never thought could be real. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, I felt like we were walking it together. The days after Ethan's confession were a whirlwind of stolen glances and tentative touches. We were like teenagers, fumbling through this new thing between us, every moment charged with possibility and fear. The apartment, once a safe haven, now felt like a stage where every word and gesture carried weight. Ethan was trying. I could see it in the way he reached for my hand when we watched movies, the way he smiled at me over breakfast, his eyes soft and unguarded. But I could also see the struggle, the moments when he'd tense up, like he was waiting for the world to judge him. I wanted to tell him it was okay, that we could take it slow, but I was just as scared. I've been hurt before, and the thought of losing him, of losing this, kept me up at night. One evening, we went for a walk in Prospect Park, the autumn leaves crunching under our feet. The air was crisp, and Ethan's hand found mine, his fingers lacing through mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. "This feels good," he said, his voice quiet. "Being with you like this." I smiled, my heart swelling. "Yeah, it does." But the moment was cut short by a text from his father. Ethan's face darkened as he read it, and he let go of my hand. "He wants to meet for dinner tomorrow," he said, his voice flat. "Just me," I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. "You'll be fine," I said, but the words felt empty. I knew what this dinner meant, a chance for Richard to pull Ethan back into the life he was trying to escape. The next day, Ethan left for the dinner, his shoulders stiff, his smile forced. I spent the evening sketching, trying to distract myself, but my mind kept drifting to him. What was his father saying? Was he pressuring Ethan to walk away from this, from us? When Ethan came home, he was quiet, his eyes distant. He sank onto the couch, a glass of whiskey in his hand, and I knew something was wrong. "What happened?" I asked, sitting beside him. He took a long sip before answering. "He knows," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "About us." My stomach dropped. "Ow!" Ethan shook his head. "I don't know. He just knew. Said he'd heard rumors, that I was throwing my life away. He told me to end it. To be normal." The word hit like a slap. Normal. As if what we had, what we were building, was something to be ashamed of. I reached for his hand, but he pulled away, his jaw tight. "Ethan," I said, my voice trembling. "You don't have to listen to him. You're not doing anything wrong." He looked at me, his eyes filled with pain. "I know. But it's not that simple. Vin. He's my dad. He's everything I've ever known." I wanted to argue, to tell him he was enough without his father's approval, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I stood, my heart aching. "I'm here, Ethan. When you're ready." He nodded, but he didn't look at me. I went to my room, closing the door behind me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt alone. The next few days were tense. Ethan was distant, buried in work, and I threw myself into my art, trying to fill the space he'd left. But every night, I catch him watching me, his eyes filled with a longing that broke my heart. He was fighting a battle I couldn't help him win, and it terrified me. One night, I found him in the kitchen, staring at a photo on his phone, a picture of us from the gala, laughing on the balcony. "I don't want to lose this," he said, his voice raw. "I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I said, stepping closer. "But you have to choose, Ethan. Not for your dad. Not for me, for you." He looked at me, his eyes shining with tears. "I'm trying, Vin. I'm trying so hard." I pulled him into a hug, his body trembling against mine. For the first time, I felt the weight of his fear, his uncertainty, and I knew this was bigger than us. It was about Ethan finding himself, and all I could do was stand by him and hope he'd choose the life he wanted, not the one he'd been told to live. The turning point came on a rainy Saturday, the kind of day that made Brooklyn feel like a cocoon. Ethan and I had spent the morning in the apartment, the tension between us softening into something quieter, more hopeful. He made pancakes, a clumsy attempt at normalcy, and I'd teased him about the batter splattered on his shirt. For a moment, it felt like we were us again. But then his phone rang, and I saw his father's name on the screen. Ethan hesitated, his thumb hovering over the decline button. "I have to take this," he said, his voice resigned. I nodded, my heart sinking as he stepped into his room, closing the door behind him. I tried to focus on my sketch pad, but the muffled sound of his voice, sharp, defensive, cut through me. When he emerged, his face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed. "He's giving me an ultimatum," Ethan said, sinking onto the couch. "Quit my job, move back to Connecticut, or he's cutting me off. No trust fund, no support. Nothing." I stared at him, my mind racing. "What did you say?" He laughed, a broken sound. I told him I needed time. "But Vin, I don't know what to do. This is my family. My future." I knelt in front of him, taking his hands in mine. "Your future is what you make it, Ethan. Not what he decides for you." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "What if I'm not strong enough?" "You are," I said fiercely. "You're stronger than you know. And I'm here, Ethan. I'm not going anywhere." For a moment, he just stared at me, like he was seeing me for the first time. Then he leaned forward, kissing me with a desperation that took my breath away. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a promise, a choice, a step towards something real. The next day, Ethan called his father back. I sat in my room, pretending to work, but every word carried through the thin walls. "I'm not coming back," Ethan said, his voice steady. "This is my life, Dad. I'm choosing it." When he hung up, he found me in my room, his face a mix of fear and relief. "I did it," he said, his voice trembling. I told him. I pulled him into my arms, my heart swelling with pride. "I'm so proud of you." The weeks that followed weren't easy. Ethan's father cut him off, and the financial strain was real. But Ethan was different, lighter, freer, like a weight had been lifted. He started looking for new jobs, ones that aligned with who he was, not who his father wanted him to be. And through it all, we grew closer, our relationship deepening into something solid and true. One evening, as we stood at the windows we cleaned all those weeks ago, Ethan wrapped his arms around me, his chin resting on my shoulder. The city stretched out before us, a canvas of light and possibility. "I never thought I'd get here," he said, his voice soft. "But I'm glad I did. With you." I turned in his arms, kissing him gently. Me too. The road ahead wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, family, society, our own fears. But we faced them together, hand in hand, building a life that was ours. Ethan had chosen himself, and in doing so, he'd chosen us. And as I looked into his eyes, I knew that no matter what came next, we'd be okay. Because love, real love, was worth every risk, every fight, every breathless moment.